All right, so I've recorded 12 minutes worth of video footage twice now and deleted it all because of how I just went off the rails about this lie and this scam. Happened a year ago, and I almost told you about it then, but I didn't for certain reasons, and I was going to never tell you about it, but it kind of happened again recently, so it's time to just tell you about it. I'm going to try not to lose my crap here as I do. Getting straight to it. Situation was this. Last year, my beautiful bride Dearly, aka Giggly Girl, had a sister that passed away. She died in January of last year at 35 years old. She died in labor, giving birth to her son Andy, who, Andy survived. He's healthy. He's happy. He's being raised by Connie and Dearly's mother. So anyway, when this happened, my wife's from the Philippines, as you know, if you follow the channel. We've been here now 6 years. When this happened, we had been here for 5 years, and we had not been back to the Philippines from the time we moved to the U.S. from the Philippines. First couple of years, we intentionally didn't go back because I needed to readjust to this culture. I'd been out of the country for most of 8 years, Iraq, Philippines. And Dearly had never been in the U.S. Daniel was born in the Philippines. He had never been to the U.S., so they needed to kind of adjust to the culture for the first time. So I didn't want to be going back and forth. We, as a group, didn't want to be going back and forth too frequently because the cultures are very different. At face value, they look very similar. You go over there, it's like, oh, wow, McDonald's and Coca-Cola everywhere. Yeah, welcome to the world. But I don't want to go too far off the tracks with this. Then for the next couple of years, we couldn't afford it. We had a couple of down years, and we simply could not afford to take the trip. It's an expensive trip. They were good. Look, I'm just going to tell you. I mean, they were there for 3 months last year, and it cost us $15,000. And we paid. We didn't finance it. We didn't put it on credit cards. We were out $15,000. It's expensive. It's not like going to the beach for the weekend or something. So here's the deal. When you're taking a trip like that, it's always, of course, best to buy your airfare many months in advance if you know you're going, because it literally round trip airfare, buying the tickets out about 4 months before they went, February, March, April, May. Okay, 3 months before they went, because they left in May, was $2,500 for a round trip for two. If you wait until like the week or the 2 weeks before the trip, you're going to pay $5,000 or more. So this was we were into the second year of the COVID thing, but the kids were back in school. The second half of last year, they went back to school. Did they? Oh, no. This is part of the story. This is how it worked. They were still doing their virtual learning. So we took that into consideration when planning this trip. And I told my wife, I was like, well, hey, you don't technically have to wait for the end of the school year to end, because since it's virtual, Daniel can take his laptop and you can, do it from there, in which he did. He took his laptop and he was in school. It's a 12-hour time difference because they're literally on the other side of the earth. If you held the earth like this and Virginia, USA was here, your thumb would be on the Philippines. 12-hour difference. You can't get any further away from here. I mean, unless if you dip down into the southern hemisphere, because they're just above the equator, 7 degrees above the equator in the northern hemisphere. So he would do his classes, I think, from 8 p.m. to like 11:30 p.m. at night. And his cousins were all up playing and stuff anyway. It's not like he was staying up late. And then he'd go to bed, get a good night's sleep, play all next day, then do class at night. But about 2 weeks before this trip, it occurred to me, wait a minute, this laptop that my son uses for school isn't ours. We don't own that. It's provided by the school, and it's a Dell. It's a great, and it's a public school. We live in a wonderful place. The schools here are great because there's a very high tax base here. Let me tell you, it's an affluent area. A lot of people here pay a lot of taxes. Most people pay more money each year in taxes than most people in America earn. That's a true story. So we have wonderful schools, and they can afford to give the kids Dells. It's great. We have good bridges, good roads. you know, I don't enjoy sending the IRS these huge lumps of money every year, but I enjoy my infrastructure and I enjoy the quality of my kids' school. So I don't complain about it. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of that comes from spending 8 years in third world countries that don't have a tax base. I've seen what it's like when people don't pay taxes. It sucks. You want to complain about taxes? Go live in a third world country and then come back and let's compare notes again. Whatever. This isn't about taxes. This is about this lie, this scam. So when it occurred to me, wait, this laptop isn't ours. I better contact the school to get permission to make sure we can take, they can take this laptop into another country. Or should we have Daniel take his own and sign him into their system from his laptop? Would they allow that? I don't know. So I email the principal of his school and I say, hey, and the principal already knew. I'd talked to the guy. He knew that they were taking this trip. He knew they were going to the Philippines. So I email him and I say, hey, they're flying out in 2 weeks. And I just had like a last moment's thought. Is it okay if Daniel takes the laptop? It's school property. I want to make sure we have your permission before he takes this, laptop to another country. And the guy emails back and he says, yes, it's okay for him to take his laptop, but you need to understand that he's going to be leaving during the time period that we're taking the SOLs, and those are going to be taken in person. Those must be taken in person. He must be here for that. The SOLs, a lot of you, I know you know what this is. It stands for Standards of Learning. It's these standardized tests that they make the kids take into public schools at the end of every year. And it's all about federal money, okay? Because if the kid scores super high and that school has really high scores, then the federal government's happy. They don't even consider taking away their budget. It's really crazy because if they score super low or something, I don't know, you'd think they would need to give more money to the budget to maybe make some improvements, but I think they reduce or so. It affects the schools, the teachers, the administrators. It doesn't affect the students, okay? Colleges don't even take SOLs into consideration. Like if Daniel wants to go to UVA down here in Charlottesville when he's out of high school, UVA's not even going to look at that. They don't care. They don't matter, okay? But by God, they matter to people who work within the system, okay? And they've got to have those high marks, right? So the guy emails back and he says, well, Daniel's got to be in school to take these tests physically in person. So I emailed back and I'm like, well, I bought the airline tickets 2.5 months ago. This trip's been planned for months. I've already talked to you about this. How do we take care of this? So the guy messages me back and he says, well, here are your options. He says, you could fly Daniel back to the U.S., let him take those tests for that week or 10 days or whatever it is, and then after his tests are finished, then you can fly him back to the Philippines. No problem. And I'm like, this is a very expensive trip. I mean, it was a $15,000 trip. I said, we're not going to do that. What are our other options? He goes, okay, well then now your other options are this. He says, you can pull Daniel out of our school, withdraw him from school, and then re-enroll him in a school of equal or greater value in the Philippines, and he can go to school there. Or you can withdraw him from school and you can homeschool him, and then you could administer the SOL test to him. He says, I'm providing a link for you where you can get all of your licenses and all this other stuff to be able to homeschool your child. And I'm like, okay, well, wait a minute. I can fly my son $2,500 round trip if you buy it 3 months in advance. I'm not letting the kid fly on a plane from Philippines to America by himself. So you're telling me, spend this money to fly him over there and then turn around and spend probably $8,000 on a round trip to bring him back for a week, then go back, or I can homeschool him, or I can that's the only options. Is this correct? And he said, yes, those are your only options. And man, they were 2 weeks away from going. Dearly was still distraught, about losing her sister, but at the same time, she was excited for her trip. She was talking to her family, what do you call it? Messenger, Facebook Messenger, every day. They were all excited about the trip. There were people coming off, from the mountains out in the villages, coming to one central place to see Daryl and Daniel when they got there. So now I was faced with this mess. So I just think, well, we might have to set our trip back by a couple of weeks. So I didn't insure my tickets. I never insure my plane tickets. I'm not going to buy a plane ticket unless I know I'm taking that trip. And I've never not used a plane ticket I've ever bought. I thought, well, I didn't insure them, but I can call the airlines and switch the dates. Maybe they'll just let me switch the dates. So I called the airlines, talked to them about doing that, and guess what? Yeah, they let me do it for another $1,200 because we were closer to the flight date, so the fees were more expensive. So, wow, $1,200, oh my gosh. So I said, well, let me think about this and talk to my wife. So I got off the phone, and my wife that day was out running around with one of her friends, and she came home, and her friend came by, and I saw her friend, and so Dearly was asking me, have you made progress with figuring out what we're going to do with, the laptop and the SOLs and all this stuff? And I said, well, yeah. I said, I think it was going to cost us another $1,200. We're going to have to change the day of the trip, push it back 2 weeks, so you can take these SOLs. And then her friend was like, oh, snap. She wanted to go down to Florida that week. She's got a father who lives in Maryland but spends a lot of time in Florida shelling. He's an avid sheller, and this guy's an amazing guy. I've met him once. Very impressive guy. He's in his 70s, and he still runs. I know he's done marathons. I don't know if he does marathons anymore, but he does 10Ks and 5Ks, and he's fit. I mean, I would have a hard time keeping up with him, and I'm fit. I train. Impressive guy. But his thing is shelling, and he'll watch the tides like all over the place, and he knows where certain shells exist, where they don't exist in other places. He knows when the tides are right, what time of year to be there. So when he'll go to Florida, and he'll invite his daughter to go sometimes, and she'll go, and she'll take his kid, our son's friend. So she's like, oh, snap, we were going to go spend the week with Dad in Florida that week when he's shelling. She goes, how am I going to get out of this? And I told her, I don't know, but if you figure it out, tell me. So she's like, okay. Well, I think it was the next day, she went to the school, and she talked to her kid's teacher, and she said, we want to go to Florida that week, but I understand that the kids have to be present for the SOL, so I guess I got to cancel my trip or something. And the teacher's like, oh, no, go to Florida, have fun. He doesn't have to be here for that. And our friend was like, what? He said, oh, yeah, he doesn't have to take those tests. And our friend said, well, what about the lakes? They're like running around frantic right now trying to figure out what they're going to do with their trip to the Philippines. And the teacher was like, huh? What? So she explained to him what I just explained to you. And this teacher was like, oh, God. And then our friend was like, what? And she said, I'm going to tell you something based upon 2 conditions. Number 1, don't take this the wrong way. Don't think for a minute I'm saying anything derogatory or negative about your son. That's our friend's son, because he's a wonderful kid. He's a great kid, and he's a good student. So don't think I'm saying anything bad about him. And number 2, if you tell this to the lakes, which I think you should, do not mention my name, because if this comes back to me, I will get fired. That's what she said. And our friend said, okay, I'll leave your name out of it. And she did. Okay, and it's a year later now, and I don't know who told her this, okay? So she told her, number 1, the Lakes kid, Daniel. Wow, now it's going to start pouring the rain on me. I'm going to finish the story anyway. I think maybe someone or something doesn't want this story told. It's going to be told. They said Daniel, our son, is like one of the top academic students in the school. And he's one of those kids who he doesn't even have to try. He just shows up. He's like got this really high natural level of intelligence. He never studies. We have to stay on top of him to do his homework if he has it, which is rare. He doesn't have much. But he just shows up, halfway pays attention, whips out the test, and gets, just straight A's. This teacher told our friend, that he's one of those kids that the principal definitely wanted to take those SOLs because he was the guaranteed thing to make those test scores be very high to, of course, make the principal and that school look wonderful. Right? Our friend's kid, good kid, great kid. Good student, but maybe not a great student. And it's not because he lacks intelligence. He's just, it's not his thing. Everybody has different things, and everybody knows that. I don't need to explain that any further. Let me tell you, this kid I'm talking about, he's got some outside activities, some extracurricular stuff he does that he is really good at. I mean, like, especially for his age, you might see this kid on TV someday. So just because he's not like Mr. Academic All-Star doesn't mean he's not doing great things in other places, because he is, okay? So this teacher pretty much told our friend that we were intentionally being lied to so that our son would be there to take those SOLs to make that school's scores high. When she came to our house to tell us that, I was pissed. I Googled it. I'd never thought to Google it. And so I did. And just before coming up to make this video, I Googled it again to make sure that this is still the case, because it is. So here it is, at least in the state of Virginia. I don't know what state you're in, but in the state of Virginia, these SOL tests, if you Google, can you opt out of your child taking this, or does your child have to take this? Here's how it reads. It says there is no opt-out option. Okay, so they're saying that you can't opt out of these SOL tests. However, parents and guardians can refuse to allow their children to take those tests. Isn't that opting out? Yeah, it's written ambiguously because it's meant to confuse you, because they don't want you to know your rights. This is another reason I never told this story last year, because last year was a gubernatorial election here in Virginia, and I didn't want to make it look like I was picking sides. Glenn Youngkin, a Republican, first Republican governor in 20 years, got in there largely because a lot of parents were pissed about how much they were lied to from the schools. This is a prime example. My wife was experiencing extreme grief. She lost her sister. She hadn't been home in 5 years, nor had Daniel, and that was his birthplace. He's got family. He's got a couple of aunts. He's got 2 wonderful aunts and some cousins in the United States that we have relationships with. He doesn't have grandparents here. He doesn't have, cousins his age. Well, he's got one little cousin his age he met last summer. She's a great little girl, and we hope she comes back here real soon. But like family, his is there, is what I'm saying. And this principal led me to believe a lie that almost cost me $1,200 so he could look good with these test scores. So here's what I did. I called the school back, and the receptionist answered the phone, and I said, yeah, told her who I was, and she's a wonderful lady. Everybody down there is wonderful, and the principal's no longer there. So what I will say is everybody that I know there that I've dealt with is wonderful. And I never had any beef with him before this. I liked the guy, I did. So I call and I say, hey, yeah, I'm calling to let you guys know that we're going to refuse to let Daniel take the SOLs this year because he's going to be in the Philippines. And she said, oh, okay, that's great. We hope he enjoys the trip, but you'll just need to follow up with an email because we need to have it in writing. And I said, okay, so you're telling me that all I've got to do is send you that email and this is a done deal. And she goes, yeah. I said, okay, I would like to talk to Dr. I almost said his name, I'm not going to say it, because I don't think he's aware of this. And then I kind of let her have it a little bit. I said, I almost spent another $1,200 that I'm not really too comfortable parting with for a plane ticket that I didn't need to buy because I was unaware of this until I found out recently. I don't think he's aware of this, and I would like to make him aware of this. And she goes, oh, hold please, puts me on hold, comes back a minute later and said he was unavailable. He never returned my call. I never called him back. I let it go. I have not spoken to that man since. The last communication I had with him was when he was lying to me, telling me I was going to have to pull my kid out of the school, homeschool him, or send him to a nice school in the Philippines, like a private school, something to be equal to what they're doing over here, which is a public school. It's a really wonderful public school. Man, it's like... So anyway, I let it go. But then here about a month or so ago, something else happened. We were lied to again, and I just felt like coming on here and telling you about it because I bet some of you are being lied to as well. All right. I would like to think that Dearly and I are good parents. We would never knowingly send our son to school if he were sick. If he, especially with COVID, if he gave any sort of indication that he was not well, he would stay home. I work from home like I'm doing right now, working in the woods outside behind my house. Dearly works from home. We have that luxury and that privilege to be at home all day. So if our kid needs to miss school, we're here for him. We don't have to miss work. We don't have to hire a babysitter, pay for childcare. About a month or so ago, he went to school on a Monday. He was tired that morning. We know he was tired. He had a long weekend. He went to 2 parties, an all-day-long birthday party on Saturday, all-day-long birthday party on Sunday. He was worn out. But, yeah, we weren't up late. He went to school. We knew he was tired. An hour or so later, we get a text and a call from the school that he had a fever and we needed to come get him. Okay, great. We'll go get him. We both go down there. Okay, I'm driving. Dearly's in the truck. And she's like, you can sit in the truck. I'll go get him. I'm like, okay. Because they're really still trying to limit how many people actually go into the building, which is great. I get it. There's still this whole COVID thing going on, okay? So I'm sitting in the truck, and we get there, and he's out front. And I'm simply going to say that he was out there with a school official. I'm not going to name the person, and I'm not going to name their department. I'm just going to say a school official. And the school official had on, their COVID mask and a freaking looked like a hazmat suit practically. And she's talking to my wife, and she has a piece of paper in her hand. She's giving her this paper, and I'm like, oh, whatever. I'm sitting there flipping around the radio station. So they come to get in the truck, turn off the radio. We never turn the radio on when we're on the truck because we always talk. So I say, okay, so are you okay, buddy? He says, yeah, I'm fine. He says, I think I'm just worn out. I'm like, yeah, I think you are too. So then Dearly says, she takes this piece of paper, she sticks it in the console, and she goes, we have to take him to the doctor. I said, why? What's wrong? He says he's fine, he just feels tired. And so what it was is this person told her that we had to take him to our primary care physician. He had to take a COVID test, and there was this checklist on this form. The doctor had to check all this stuff, whether he has or hasn't had all these things, and then he has to sign it and date it, and our son can't return to school unless he has that form filled out by his doctor. I'm like, well, if it's what we got to do, it's what we got to do, I guess. We're not going to do it that day, because we had our day planned out already. I said, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll start calling the doctor tomorrow. Well, so the next morning, I call my doctor. The phone's busy. Can't even get through. I'm like, well, I'll call him later. Call him like just after lunch, a little after lunch. Busy again, right? I'm like, wow, my kid's going to end up missing several days of school here because I can't get him in to see the doctor. And that's been the case during this COVID thing. There's been times we've gone to the health department if we needed medical assistance for anything. Not because we don't have a doctor, or not because we can't afford to pay. We certainly can, and we're blessed for that, and we don't take it for granted. We're grateful for that. We got into the health department, and they started asking us these financial questions. I'm like, look, we're not going to qualify for any discounts. We're just here because we can't get in touch with our doctor. And they're like, wow, yeah. A lot of people have been doing it too, I guess, because of COVID. So one of my sisters, ironically, that I just mentioned, got 2 of them I have a relationship with, was coming to see us. Her and her daughter came down, and they spent the night. And so my sister, she gets here, me and her sitting on the front porch, hanging out, watching Daniel play basketball in the front with her daughter. And I'm like, I pick up the phone, I call the doctor again. It wasn't quite evening, it was just 4 or 5. I'm like, man, I cannot get through to the doctor. That's 3 times I've called today, and I can't even get through to make an appointment. And she's like, what's wrong? Why do you need to see your doctor? So I told her about what happened the day before. And then told her what, the school official told my wife. Well, here's the thing about that sister. She's a teacher. So she looks at me and she goes, no, you don't. You don't have to take him to the doctor. I'm like, well, what do I have to do? And she goes, you don't have to do a damn thing. You've got options. She says what they want is they want you to take him to the doctor, and they want to just like KYA, cover their backside, and the statistics. They want to make sure that statistics are all right, and so they can report to the health department who has it, who doesn't. And I'm like, look, I get that. I told my sister, I get that. But he had COVID in Manila. Their trip got extended for 3 weeks because he tested positive before they boarded the plane to come home. They made him self-isolate over there for 3 weeks. He's been vaccinated. Our whole family's been vaccinated. We've all had COVID tests. We're just so done with this. We're done with going and having Q-tips stuck up our noses. You know, and even when I had it, and I'm not downplaying it, I know it's a serious issue, and I know it's cost a lot of people a lot of lives. It's cost a lot of people their loved ones, and I am sorry that that happened. And I would never make light of that. It wasn't our experience. We got it. We got the Omicron variant. We felt bad for a few days. Our extreme level of fitness and the fact that we were vaccinated, I do believe, kept us from having, worse repercussions from it. But we have done everything that has been expected, and we were just sick and tired of this. And when my sister said, no, you don't, that's just what the school wants you to do, because she's told the same thing at her school. And my sister told me, she said, she should have given you a form. I said, yeah, the checklist. And she goes, did you look at the back? And I'm like, well, I haven't even looked at the form. She just gave it to Dearly and said, this is what you have to do or your kid can't come back to school. She goes, turn it over, read the back, go down to the bottom, and there's in very small, 6-point text, it says, or you could just keep your kid home for 10 days. Or 10 calendar days, which isn't even 2 weeks of school. It's like 1 week of school, and then because it was sandwiched on by weekends. I was like, you're kidding me. She goes, go get the form. So I went, I got it, I got the form, and sure enough, what it was is they put what they wanted you to do on top, and they highlighted it. You must take your child to the doctor, and blah, 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 blah. When I saw that on the bottom, I was like, gee, then I told my sister about how they lied to us the year before with the trip and how we almost paid $1,200, And she said, look, she goes, the schools have agendas and they want their agendas carried out. So they don't outwardly just flat out lie to you. Well, the principal did, and this other school official kind of did too. They become artists of the lie of omission. They don't give you all the information. They give you the information that would steer you in the direction they want you to go. And then they stop. So then if you ever call them out on it, well, in very typical passive-aggressive / gaslighting fashion, they can say, oh, I never said that. No, you didn't. Not at all. You just lied to me about what my options were. So anyway, it's really not hard to see how Glenn Youngkin got in there, man. I think people are just sick of it. That, and then, of course, how the media says that all rural white males are racist. You better hurry up and get down there to the polls and vote against Youngkin before all those rural white men in Virginia go voting. Yeah, you kind of get sick of being told you hate people based upon their skin color or their nationality or their sexual orientation. You kind of get sick of that. And so you don't become that, which they say that you are, because you don't want to let them win, and you just don't want to be those terrible things. But after a while, you kind of start to hate the people that tell you that you're hateful. Media, DNC, and I'm not trying to be political, but if you think you're winning votes by going around proclaiming the people who live out in the country are racists, you're not. So there you have it, folks. I hope this helps somebody in some way. I'm out of coffee, so you know what I got to do now. Pajama pants or not. Hey, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Bigfoot, Sasquatch. Hey, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Bigfoot, Sasquatch.